Yeah, I guess I can start. So my name is Frank. I'm currently a senior at Columbia University. I think I've heard about the LeFrak Center for Wellness, and I feel like it's a very good idea because like Barnard is right across the street from me. Yeah, I'm currently like studying computer science. Yeah, and currently just like thinking about what I want to do, after graduation. Yeah.
Cool. Excellent.
Hey, I'm JL. I'm a sophomore at Princeton University. I'm majoring in computer science as well with minors in French and African studies. And yeah, I can't wait to hear from you.
All right. Thank you. Good to meet you. We've got one other person online.
Hi, I'm Miguel Ruggiero. I go to Oklahoma. Put on my camera because I'm still at work. Yeah, but sure. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch where you're going to college and what you're studying.
Oh, yeah, I go to Oklahoma Christian University and I'm majoring in finance and accounting.
Okay, cool. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, well, excellent. Well, good to meet you guys. I guess, first of all, congrats on being LeFrak Scholars. That's a great honor, and I'm sure it's not easy to do. So that's really fantastic stuff. So, my name is Tendayi Kapfidze. I used to be just like you guys. I came from Zimbabwe to go to college here in the U.S. I went to St. Louis University. I was also the beneficiary of a scholarship. I think my scholarship was like 33%, and then I got like 18% work study, so that was like 51%. And then had to figure out the rest. But the scholarship was a big help, so it's really fantastic. I think that's one of my favorite things about the U.S. and about American culture. It's a culture of giving, and it's a culture of giving to strangers, right? Which I think I've seen here more than I've seen in most other countries. Before I came to the U.S., I was in Madrid in Spain. I actually went to St. Louis University Madrid campus before I transferred over to the home campus in St. Louis. I studied engineering, but now I'm an economist. So right now I work at Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo is the third biggest bank in the US. I'm the chief economist. And that means that I have a cool sounding title that is way cooler than the job itself. But I'm kidding. The job is pretty cool. But so what I do at Wells Fargo is, if you think about the way that a bank functions, right? We're involved in financial markets. We're exposed to a lot of financial market risk. We lend to consumers, so we're exposed to risk if consumers are unable to meet their obligations. We're trying to, earn some profit for shareholders, et cetera. So we're trying to balance a lot of competing interests. And all of that happens in the context of, whatever the current and expected future states of the economy might be. And then another big thing that as a bank we're concerned about is interest rate risk. So, essentially changes in interest rates affect, economic activity. They affect, the health of our clients and consumers, and they affect the value of assets on our balance sheets. So, for example, tomorrow, there's a big meeting of the Federal Reserve. They're expected to increase the target Fed funds rate by 75 basis points. So Fed Day, as we call it, is one of the biggest days of the quarter of the month as an economist, because you kind of get some insights into what the Fed is thinking to do for the next time. So we kind of already know what they're going to do tomorrow, but the question is, what are they going to say about what they're going to do in the next time? And then that tells us, something about the future path of interest rates. So that's, in a nutshell, kind of, what you do as a chief economist at a bank. You're really trying to figure out what's happening with the economy, what's happening with interest rates, and then you're advising, senior leadership in terms of, how to manage the bank's risks on the balance sheet, and how to counsel and advise our customers about how they should be managing either their business or their personal finances. So that's kind of, what I'm doing today. I'll just pause there for any questions you guys might have, before, I can talk about something else.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How was the transition for you from like engineering to finance? Like, were you prepared for it, like taking classes in college, or was it just like a sudden decision? And how did that go?
Yeah, it was kind of random, actually. So I studied engineering in St. Louis, and then when I was graduating, I had kind of started to hear about investment banking, and I had a couple of friends kind of start to do that. So I was like, you know what, I might want to try this out. I'll be honest, really, the reason was I studied engineering, and all the engineering companies were like in the middle of nowhere, and I wanted to be in a big city. And so, I wasn't trying to go to Caterpillar in a field in Illinois somewhere. I was like, I want to go to like New York. So I actually came to New York. I interviewed a bunch of places, and I never got a job in New York when I was interviewing as an undergrad. I think part of it was, I didn't go to like a big name school. I didn't go to like a Target school, but I ended up at Capital One in Virginia, which at the time was like a really, much smaller, just a credit card company. And because I studied engineering, they had me working as an operations analyst, which essentially was we were managing the process. Like when you get your credit card, right? When you order a credit card in the mail, it comes, it's got your name printed on it. They put the numbers on the back and all that kind of stuff. There's basically like a little factory of, machines that make the credit card. So I worked kind of as an operations analyst in that factory. So we worked on how do we make that process efficient. And then the big thing that you worry about when you're sending out credit cards is fraud. So you kind of have to balance, hey, we want to do this really fast, but we want to do it really safe and avoid fraud and not send out cards to a bunch of people who are trying to, steal other people's money or trying to steal the company's money. So that's like an operations design kind of role, which is like an engineering type of role, but it also has a lot of obviously financial risk overlaid and a lot of financial analysis. So that's kind of how I started getting into finance. And then I went from Capital One, I went to Bank of America, and there I worked on mortgages. And I was working on mortgage, setting the interest rates for mortgages. And then, so remember when I said tomorrow the Fed is meeting and they're gonna, move around these interest rates. Different parts of the economy react to interest rates in different ways. And the housing market, we call it an interest rate sensitive sector. So it's one of those parts of the economy that activity really increases a lot or decreases a lot, depending on what's happening with interest rates. So right now, for example, activity is decreasing a lot because the rates are very high, because most people have to borrow in order to buy a house in the United States. So if the price of money, which is basically all an interest rate is the price of money, the price of money is high, then less people are going to be borrowing money to buy houses, right? So basically, essentially, by becoming I entered, that mortgage business as an operations, it was called a process design engineer, which again was kind of a process role with engineering attached, where we were getting mortgage applications in. You want to process them quickly and get them out, but you want to try and avoid fraud in the process. And you also want to avoid lending money to people who are not going to be able to pay back. So you're trying to balance all of that. So that was another kind of engineering role, but it was in a finance company. So then I was getting exposed to all this stuff about interest rates and finance, et cetera. And then I ended up taking a thing called the CFA, the Chartered Financial Analyst course, which actually the results just came out today. I think the pass rate was 48%. It's really difficult. Sometimes the pass rates are like 30%. But if you kind of do that qualification, then you're like a financial analyst, and people kind of know that you have a certain amount of aptitude for the subject matter. So I did the CFA, and then that's kind of how I transitioned fully from like a process kind of role in financial services into financial analyst, economist type of role.
Thank you. I have another question, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you said you're an international student, and I just wanted to know how it worked out for you, like changing jobs, because one of my main like fears is like when I get out of college, I'm like, I have to get a job, like a very steady one. So that's, OPT and everything. So
Yeah.
wasn't that complicated, like maybe sometimes, in between?
Yeah, it can be difficult. So you have to have like a solid plan, and you got to execute, and you got to put a lot of hours into it. So I'll probably say if I go back to my very last semester in college, I was taking some classes, but I told myself I was like, my main role or my main class is to find a job that's going to sponsor my visa, right? So I was doing a lot of research. I was reaching out to a lot of people. I probably applied to over 100 different positions. So you just kind of, it's like brute force, right? But there are resources out there. You can do some research and find out which companies are most likely to offer a visa sponsorship, right? If you search for like the H-1B database, you can see the companies that sponsor. So you kind of have to select and say, I'm going to target this company because I saw that, last year they sponsored, 100 computer scientists, or, whatever the role it is that you want. So you have to be very targeted in finding the companies that do offer visa sponsorship and going for those companies in particular. Now, the good news is right now the labor market is really tight, right? The unemployment rate is very low. So companies are very eager to, they're looking for talent. It's challenging to find people. I just hired a climate economist myself. It wasn't easy. So, you're fortunate in that. I think it's going to be a good job market. Even if we get a recession, I think the job market is still going to be good, just because there's not enough workers for all the opportunities that are out there.
Thank you.
Sure.
I had another question. I had a question as well.
Sure, go ahead.
So I was wondering for you, after working in both industries, which one do you think is much safer in terms of like having a stable job and in terms of growth? Which industry do you think provides you with like opportunity to grow and see yourself, see the impact that you're creating in the industry? And again, for someone who's interested in, let's say, business world, but currently pursuing a degree in the engineering field, what do you think? Do you think it's better to start in engineering and then transition later, or start straight into the business and stick to it?
Yeah. So, I'll say, I'll answer the last part first. There's no set paths, right? Everybody has like a different path. I'll say of all the people that I've encountered that, have been successful, in financial services, no two people have like the same background, right? So the way that I think about it is I tend to keep an open mind. I'm open to like opportunities, but definitely you want to be pursuing things and doing things that you're excited about, because you're going to do better at those things than if you do something that, you're like, you wake up every morning, you're like, oh my God, here we go again. I got to go to this place again. It's difficult to excel when you're not motivated, right? So it's good to be very kind of deliberate and strategic about your career plan. but don't select areas of focus just based on that. And then another thing that I like to say, I know it's probably easy for me to say now because like I'm on the other side of all these visa issues right now. I have citizenship, but don't make decisions like out of fear, right? In terms of like, oh, I'm gonna have to do this because I have to do it for the visa, right? If you kind of at your last option, you can probably do that. But I'd always say like, if there's something that you're really interested in, just kind of pursue that, right? And try and find opportunities in that area because that's your area of interest, and that's how you're going to excel and succeed because you're interested in the work. And then in terms of industries, I think one of the best things about the U.S. is it's such a dynamic economy, and there's lots of different industries, and you can be successful in many different ways. So, for example, when I was studying engineering, I never thought I was going to be an economist, right? But it just kind of happened. Opportunities came along. I was open-minded about it. And then, if you're an engineer, like in finance, we love engineers. Just because it's like the training is very rigorous, it's very quantitative. There's a lot of quantitative work in finance. So, engineers get hired in finance like all the time. And then also, just like real kind of, if you want to go like a pure engineering route, there's great opportunities in those industries as well. So it's all about like your interest, but yeah, definitely if you're interested in finance, and you're like, halfway or 2/3 of the way down an engineering degree, just kind of go ahead and finish your engineering degree. You don't necessarily have to pivot while you're studying. The one thing that I did is I started out just doing pure engineering, and I finished up doing what was called engineering management at my school, which means that I took some classes in the business school to kind of get some of that exposure.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's pretty relevant.
Sure. Anybody else? Don't be shy, guys.
Yeah, I have a question. I think I want to, add a little bit more. I want to know a little bit more about the question that JL asked, and it's just about economics. I think I didn't get, how, easy it was for you to start doing stuff related to economics. After, all you probably studied, in your undergraduate degree, for your undergraduate degree was like engineering. I didn't get the part of like, how you make that transition to start doing, economics, because, I had an interest, in economics, and then I took a few classes, but then, I just couldn't make connections between like economics and what I'll be doing like in the industry.
Yeah.
And I think, for some reason, it just made me like drop economics as a possible major. And I just wanted to know about like how you navigated through that.
Yeah. So I said earlier that, banks love engineers because engineers are very quantitative. So in the private sector, banks in particular, like economics is a very quantitative discipline. A lot of it is data analysis and data interpretation. So for example, they'll release data on like the unemployment rate. And then, you can look at the unemployment rate and then you can make a correlation between the unemployment rate and like bankruptcies, right? So a lot of it is data analysis. You're connecting different bits of data about the economy to other bits of data about the economy. And then you're making inferences about what that means about the future of the economy. So you're trying to forecast, right, what's going to happen. So really, for me, the linkage between engineering and economics, I'll just say they're just two different types of applied mathematics, right? Because they're both very quantitative disciplines. And that's how you kind of make the link. And the thought process a lot of the times is the same in terms of like problem solving, and you're trying to relate different variables and see how they interact in the real world. And then a big part of it, of course, is like risk management. So, financial services is all about risk management, you're managing financial risk. Engineering is also about risk management. You're either managing like physical risk, if you're building like products, right? Or, if it's like computer science or computer engineering, you're kind of managing all this kind of cyber risk, right? And there's a lot of analysis, quantitative assessment involved in that, and a lot of trade-offs, right? So trade-offs are the main thing, right? You could have a very you could run a bank where all the loans you make, nobody ever misses a payment, right? But it will be a very small bank, and it would take you a very long time to figure out whether you want to lend money to somebody, because you want the guaranteed, return of the money, right? So you kind of have to balance, right? So a certain amount of losses are kind of part of the function of a bank, because if you're too stringent about your lending, then you're not going to lend to many people, and then two, it's not going to be great for the economy, because a lot of good ideas or a lot of kind of good loans that could have been made, they don't get made, and then people don't get to kind of pursue some of their dreams, whether they're trying to pay for school or try to build a business, etc. So you have to be able to accept some of that risk, and so it's a risk management thing, which is very quantitative, and basically applied mathematics is the way that I think about the linkage.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, for the most part, it looks like in your career, you worked at financial institutions, but there was, you also worked at Pfizer. So, which I think is kind of interesting. Did you find like the dynamics between working in a financial institution different than working in a pharmaceutical industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Pfizer, I worked in the treasury department. So I basically worked, at the little bank inside the pharmaceutical company. So it was still very similar type of work. But I would say that the culture of the company was probably different than in financial services. Or maybe it's that, for example, when you're economist at the bank, in the where you're like the main event, right? Mm-hmm. We're at the center of everything that's happening, because we're managing a financial institution. When you're in treasury, say at a pharmaceutical company, or say treasury at any other kind of non-financial company. When I was at treasury at Pfizer, we used to say that if they're ever talking about treasury, it means that we've made a mistake, right? Because essentially we are there to facilitate or to enable the main business of the company, which is to develop drugs and market drugs, etc. Right? We're not like the main event, right? So we kind of have to be in the background, making sure that we're doing things very efficiently, minimizing the financial risk of the company, but not becoming a big part of the conversation. Certainly not becoming a distraction for the company from focusing on what their main purpose is. So that was probably the biggest difference, I think, in like the kind of interactions you have when you're, as an economist in a financial services company where, kind of everything revolves around the economy, whereas, somewhere like Pfizer, they're developing drugs over like a 10, 15-year timeline. Right, the success rate for new drugs is like 0.3%, right? So they got to try out like 300 or 1,000 different compounds before they come up with like one drug. So it's a very different kind of mindset, and it's a different kind of risk approach to the industry.
Interesting. We got another question here. So heard that you did your CFA exam. Do you mind sharing how important those certificates are in the business world and what are their benefits specifically?
Yeah, so what I'll say is that, so when I did my CFA, so I was doing this transition from like engineering and operations into like finance and economics. So one of the reasons that I did it was I was trying to show my competency, right? I was trying to demonstrate that, yay, I do have the ability to be in this space, but I didn't want to leave and go back to school full time and pay like 100 and something or 200 and something $1,000 for like an MBA. So the CFA was like 5,000, right? Which comparatively, I was like, well, this is cheap and it's good value for money, and it's going to help me demonstrate as I try to transition from operations engineering into finance economics, that I do have the aptitude and I do have the capability to do it. And it also helped me understand, much better the kind of issues that I was dealing with at work, because I was already in that type of role, but I hadn't had the training. So I found it very helpful just for me personally. Now, as a credential, I mean, I think it's a useful credential to have, but it's not a slam dunk. I think sometimes people make the mistake of thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna get a CFA and then I'm just gonna walk into a bunch of places, they're gonna love me and everybody's gonna want to give me a job. It's no different than like, when you guys graduate, you're gonna have great degrees from top schools, but that doesn't guarantee you anything in the job market, right? You still kind of have to show up for the interview. You kind of have to show your value. You have to compete with other candidates in the interview process. So I'd say if you're thinking about doing the CFA, definitely encourage you to do it. It doesn't guarantee anything though, but you will learn a lot of really useful skills and a lot of great financial analysis skills by doing it.
Great. Would you say that there was anything that you did early on in your career that maybe set you apart from your peers or kind of gave you a competitive edge?
I think one thing that I still do it now, and I encourage people to do it. Like when you're interviewing, so let's say I'm trying to hire somebody, right? And all you guys send in your resume. I call you up, I'm like, come in for an interview, right? If I'm interviewing you at all, basically I've already decided that, hey, I think this person can do the job, right? So now when you're in the interview, one, you can either dissuade me of that thought, right? You can either come to the interview and I'll just be like, oh man, I was completely wrong about this person. There's no way they can do the job, right? Or it can kind of be neutral, be like, oh yeah, I still think this person can do the job, right? Or number three, you can like kind of blow me away, right? Now, the blow me away part, it's difficult to do like when you're in the interview because you're under pressure, maybe you're a little stressed out, etc. You don't know the questions that are gonna come, etc. So what I always do is I will do the interview and then I'll always send a follow-up to the interview. And my follow-up, a lot of people will be like, oh yeah, send a thank you note to the interview. I'm like, nah, I'm not just sending like a thank you note. I'm sending like some substantial thing that demonstrates, one, my level of interest in the position, and two, my kind of level of competency in the position. So for example, I just got this job like 3 months ago. And when I interviewed, I spoke to a bunch of people and each of them, so I do this thing where I'll take the job description, right? And you'll have like all these bullet points, right? So let's say the job description says, can work in Excel or whatever, right? Now I might have something on my resume that says that, but I will take the exact line in the job description and then I will write a paragraph or two about exactly some things that I've done relating to that piece of the job description, right? And maybe it'll relate to something that they've asked me in the interview or some other thing that I wanted to. I was like, oh, I forgot to mention this in the interview. I'm going to include it there, right? Another thing that I've done in the past is I've sent like a presentation of like, oh yeah, you know what? This is what I think is happening in the economy right now. And I'll send a little presentation, like 5 or 6 slides, right? So I'm trying to generate an upside surprise, Whereas most people, you go in an interview and you generate a downside surprise, which everybody does because it's easy to do because it's difficult, right? And then the other thing that happens is like when you're interviewing people, like the round of interviews I just did just now, we interviewed like 5 people over like 2 or 3 weeks, right? By the time we meet up to have the discussion around what we thought, who did well or did what in the interview, some of those memories are kind of starting to fade, right? But actually, the guy who ended up getting this job, he sent me a follow-up. He sent some papers he had written. He referenced a model that he had built. So after the interview, try and send something very tangible, right, that they can have that demonstrates, 1, your interest in the opportunity, and 2, your competency to do the work.
Awesome. I think JL, you got a question?
Yes. So the first one is just following up on what you just said. Like, how effective are like following up emails like in the tech industry compared to like when it comes to finance? Because like in the tech industry, you have to like do all those like coding interviews and like programming. And so I'm just like wondering, if you didn't do so well in those, how effective would like a follow-up email be, and like how would it look like for like a tech internship? And my other question is like how it is to work as an African, like a person of color here in the United States, because like many people complain about the fact that it's really hard to like get promotions and just like advance in your career when you're like coming from like when you're a person of color. So I just like wanted to know your experience regarding this.
Yeah. So your first question, I mean, if there's like a coding test, et cetera, and you bomb the coding, you bomb the coding test, right? Like, you're not going to save yourself, right? Like, I think the way the follow-up really works really well is, let's say you did well on the coding test, but Frankie also did well on the coding test, right? And I'm looking and I'm like, well, who am I going with, right? Now you're like down to the top 2, right? And then if you have sent in that follow-up, that might just give you the edge, right? So if you bomb, you bomb. We all bomb sometimes, right? Don't be too hard on yourself. If you have some interview task and it doesn't work well, just dust yourself off, get ready for the next one. But like, yeah, that can really help you when it's like, oh, now I have 2 candidates. Like, who am I picking? If you go that little extra mile, that can probably help you. Your second question, so this is like a really important issue. I care a lot about it. I like to work at places where, they make an effort to ensure that, people have opportunities to really kind of fulfill their talents, and bring their best selves to work and do their best work, without encountering, attitudes or discrimination or being treated a certain way because of how they look and, where they're from, et cetera. I will say kind of in my experience, I don't feel that I haven't had any experiences that I thought that somebody directly, was, said something to me or behaved a certain way to me, because I'm a Black guy from Africa. Now, I will say that I have been in situations where sometimes you kind of wonder, when you see other people advancing, and you're not advancing, and you're like, well, what's really going on here? Something is strange, right? But of course, things like that are rarely ever explicit. So I think it's a real issue. It's a pervasive issue in the country, in the society, in almost every company. It's a problem. I will say, I think things are getting better. One, there's more awareness amongst leadership, right? And companies have policies in place that try to address this. So it's getting better, still a long way to go. So it's definitely a challenge. I think, one thing you can do is like, if you join a company, a lot of companies will have, they call like employee resource groups. So for example, here at Wells, we have the Black and African American Network. So you can kind of join some of those groups. You can find mentors, you can find people to talk to. I've just been here for like 3 months. I've had a few conversations of people who've kind of given me the heads up, like, hey, look out for this or that. And I've also had like really great conversations of people who have come to me. So, my manager and said, people have told me like, oh, you have a great manager. Your manager, really believes and he really lives the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Which is really great for me because I can already see that he's putting me in positions where I have the opportunity to succeed. So it's a problem. I think it's going to be a problem for a really long time, but it's getting better, and the actions you can take to try and insulate yourself a little bit from some of those problems. So joining some affinity groups, connecting and finding some mentors, seeing who in the organization is very vocal and very active around making sure that people are included and have opportunities. And kind of building relationships with those people is the way to go.
Thank you.
I have another question. So, I mean, you're a relatively young guy, and you moved up like into these like high-ranking positions when you were pretty young. Have you ever had any issues where somebody maybe questioned your knowledge or your expertise? Despite the fact that you're very young? How did you handle it?
I mean, yeah, actually, most of the things that have happened have been like, kind of funny. I don't think anybody's like really directly been like, oh, do you know what you're talking about? But I've definitely had occasions. So for example, like when I joined Pfizer, I joined Pfizer. It was like, my first day at Pfizer, I was in the elevator. And these two ladies were in the elevator. And so they were talking, they were doing the usual Monday morning chat, right? Like, oh, weekend was too short. I wish I was still the weekend, etc. So I made a joke and I said, oh, but you guys are scaring me. It's my first day, right? And so then they laughed. They're like, oh, so this was like in the summers. They're like, oh, are you an intern? And I kind of laughed and I was like, nah, I'm probably your boss, and they kind of laughed it off because they were probably thinking, oh, this intern's he's got a smart mouth on him. But I was the deputy chief economist at Pfizer, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm relatively young, and then I look even younger than I am, which that kind of stuff happens as well because I have a kind of young looking, affect about me. But I don't know that it's ever really held me back. But again, like very similar to the question around like, being a Black professional, sometimes you just don't know when people are not giving you opportunities or when they're discounting your work because, most of the time it doesn't happen to your face. But I don't feel that it's happened to me to the extent that it's been detrimental.
You guys have any other questions for Tendayi? So I think another question that I have is, it seems like you've been able to level up with each company that you worked with. Was there any sort of strategy when it came to your career, or did these opportunities just kind of come to you throughout your journey?
Zero strategy. I'm just like not one of those people. I'm kind of go with the flow kind of guy. I know, and like, and it's not a criticism, but I know some people have like a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan. I'm not that kind of person. I don't know what I'm having for dinner tonight. I'm not a planner. And so there's different ways to be. And I think the important thing is you got to be yourself, right? Don't try to be somebody else. And you have strengths that are different from like another person's strength. So if your strength is like, I'm going to plan very strategically for my career, you should do that. Because I know people who've done that and they've been very successful. If you're more like me, and I'm kind of like, I'm going to keep my ears open and my eyes open. And if I see an interesting opportunity, I'm going to go for it and try it out. And I'm comfortable with that uncertainty. I'm comfortable with the volatility of trying different things. Then you kind of go that route. All right. So, for example, oftentimes I'll have people come to me and they'll say, they're in a great job, they're loving it, they have some new opportunity, they don't know what to do. And I just always tell people, well, go do the new thing because you're already doing this other thing, right? But the new thing often involves a lot of risk and uncertainty, and some people are not comfortable with that, right? So you kind of got to find like, what are you comfortable with? What works best for you in terms of the goals you're trying to achieve in life, and like, your mental health and your kind of personal affect and aptitude, and you kind of do that. So yeah, I don't have a plan. My only ever plan is like I get to the new place and I give it my best shot and I do my best work. And I try to make sure people know that I'm doing like good work, right? Sometimes you got to be vocal. You got to advocate for yourself. Don't be quiet, because nobody's going to notice your work if you don't talk about it. Nobody's more interested in your career than you are. And, your manager might be doing the best for you, but ultimately they're going to be doing the best for themselves. So if you're good for them, they're going to be good for you. If you're solving problems for them, they're going to make sure that you're happy and you're taken care of because you make their life easier. And that's, kind of what it boils down to.
Awesome. That's good advice. Right. Any questions for Tendayi? Anyone else want to ask a question? All right. If we want to, we can go ahead and wrap it up now. We don't have any other questions. Is there anything else you wanted to share with us, Tendayi?
Yeah, just you guys are, add me on LinkedIn, so we can stay connected. If there's any way I can help, I'll be glad to do it. If you see something at Wells Fargo that you like, let me know. If you see something at some other company that you like and you see that I'm connected to somebody at that company, you can let me know. So yeah, find me on LinkedIn, add me, and if you need anything, just shoot me a note. Even if you just have a random question, feel free.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
All
you.
right, cool. Awesome. Good luck to you guys.
Swalat, did you have a question?
Oh.
Yeah, it's just, something that I just thought about right now.
Sure.
So like, I know like most of the times, as international students, when they're trying to like apply for internships or like, any opportunities around, we tend to have like a limitation on like, they ask you if you have like a work authorization or stuff like that. So like, I wanted like to know, have you, whenever like you met such challenges, like what did you do? Like, did you just go ahead and like apply for the job? If at all, you can really tell that you're qualified for it and just, see or like, wait to hear what they tell you? Or like, did you always like have to at least, apply for like, jobs that fit your visa status? Because I know, for instance, like I've tried to like, apply to a bunch of like different internships. It's just that, at times that limitation, gives you doubts of like, should I give it a shot or I shouldn't? So yeah, what would you do in that situation?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So I just remember that. So when I was a student here, I actually did my internship in Hong Kong because of this very reason. But if you are in a STEM field, and there's a couple of people in engineering fields here, you want to look up this organization called it's IAESTE. Yes, the IAESTE, and they do international internships. And they'll arrange your visa and everything to do this international internship. And the great thing about it is, if when you do that, the American companies love it. They're like, oh yeah, so I did an internship in Hong Kong through that organization. IAs. So you got to look up IS there, and then you got to look up the US version of it, and you can get a bunch of international internships doing that. In terms of doing internships here in the US, yeah, it is easier if you target organizations that have had international interns or hire a lot of international or foreign workers through things like H-1B and et cetera. And the main reason for that is not that the other places don't want you. If they just don't have experience navigating the visa process, it can seem very daunting to them. Just think about the first time you had to go through all this visa stuff. It's not fun. People don't want to do it if they don't have to. So you definitely want to try and find places where they have a lot of experience kind of dealing with that. And if you just Google online H-1B data or H-1B disclosure data, you can find basically a list of all the companies that do a lot of H-1B visas. And those would be great places to target both for internships and for jobs after you've graduated.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, just one more question. You mentioned about sorry, I just okay while we were closing. I was wondering, you mentioned a little bit about some if we find out any opportunities that are open in Wells Fargo, how about we just ask if you happen to know any that are currently active that we can try?
Yeah, I mean, so I've only been at the company for like 3 months, so I'm still kind of learning my way around. And it's a huge company, right? It's like 240,000 employees. Right now, there's probably like 10,000 job openings. So yeah, just go on Wells Fargo website, go on the careers section, and dig around there and see if you find something that interests you. There's nothing in particular that I'm like, oh yeah, you should look at this. I just don't know. The place is just too big.
Oh, all right. Is there like any refer programs in place?
Yeah, probably. I can probably refer you guys. If you see something you like, just let me know.
Right.
And I will take it from there.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, by the way.
All right.
Pretty
cool.
insightful.
So thank you, Tendayi, for everything.
All right, cool, Joseph. And hit me up about the center. I didn't know about that. So yeah, would love to hear more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll send a follow-up email to everybody.
All right. Awesome. Good stuff.
All right, guys. Have a great day.